Welcome to another Fusion 360 Basics video. If you're following along in the two previous videos, when I ended the last one I said, hey, you've got enough knowledge to be able to go forward and draw some things that you would like. Unfortunately, after I finished that video, I thought about it and there's one more thing. So that's this video. We're going to cover a few topics in here, and those topics are the browser, which is up here, and I mentioned it earlier in the very first video. We're going to cover more detail. Down here at the bottom, we're going to talk about the timeline, and then also we're going to talk about bodies, which are listed here, sketches, and something called components. If I go up to the top and I right click up here, I can see something about components. We're going to talk about that. So let's start. The browser tree here. What it's doing as you build, and you probably, well, you maybe saw it. It might have been collapsed on you. If I collapse all these little arrows, you don't see much. But as you're drawing, your browser tree is keeping track of certain aspects of your drawing. So what happened in our so far when we drew this cube is we drew a sketch, and that's stored under sketch right here, our first sketch called sketch 1 by default. And we drew that, and then from that sketch we created a body right there. That's the 3D extrusion. So bodies are the 3D part and sketches are the 2D part, 2-dimension, 3-dimension. And so Fusion automatically organizes things for you. Now, several extrusions might be one body, but the sketches are individual. So as we create sketches, they are stored sketch 1, maybe sketch 2, maybe sketch 3, and depending on whether we want them all to contribute to one body, they might show up as one body or they might show up as two, because you can have each sketch generate a new body if you so choose. So anyway, all you need to know for now is that as we're sketching, sketches are being created under this heading sketches, and as we're extruding, bodies are being created. What do we have down here at the bottom? It's called the timeline. And what's happening is all of the steps I'm taking to draw what's in front of me, this cube so far, are being recorded. And the great thing about that is I can go back and review my steps. So first I made sketch 1, then I made, notice also the cube is, when I hover over it, the cube is lighting up showing me my sketch, and I can go actually turn it on using the eyeball. And you can see this is my sketch. As I hover over it in the timeline, it highlights it on the cube. And now the extrusion was the next step, and you can see how that's getting highlighted as I hover over it. The great thing about this is I can edit these things at any time. So say I'm way down the line in a big large drawing, I could go back to the beginning, I could double click this sketch, and I could change its size. And what do you think is going to happen now? So I double clicked the size, I edited it, and now I'm going to finish the sketch, and look. The extrusion also changed because the extrusion was under the instructions to extrude this entire face. It didn't know that it was 2 by 2, it just extruded the face that we'd set. And now it's what, 2 by 6, and it just says, okay, extrude that face. Okay, so the cool thing also is it works with every one of these. You double click and you can re-enter or go back into the editing of that feature that you used. So in this case, as it says, it's a feature. We can make this a different size. Whoop, and push OK. Now what if I suddenly went, oh, well, that was fun. I'd like to put it all back to normal. What's the quickest way to get things to go backwards? Right. Control Z. So Control Z, Control Z, Control Z, and Control Z, and I'm back to where I started. That's just backing up. Thought I'd just remind you of that. Okay, so what you've got now is the idea behind timeline, and the idea that you can edit anything in your timeline, and the timeline's recording each individual basically command you invoke to draw something. You have the idea of your browser tree keeping track of sketches and bodies. Now the next thing I want to show you is something called components. Many objects, let me just flip here to another project. Many objects like this box again come with more than one part. In this case I have two parts. I have a lid. Over in the browser tree you can see that I have a lid and I have a bottom. So that lid and bottom. as we draw, we want to try and keep our parts organized. And this is hard to explain until you start drawing, but I'll tell you this. If you don't try and keep things organized, it can get very confusing very fast. So, if, for instance, I wanted to draw a cylinder, okay, that's something different we haven't drawn yet. The best way to do that, I'm going to consider that a new part or a new component. So I'm going to go up to the top of my browser tree. Yours will have a name because you'll have saved your file by now. I haven't saved mine. I'm going to right click on the top level and I'm going to say, hey, let's make a new component or part. Okay, it's going to pop up this dialog box. This is actually new in one of the recent updates. And you're going to tell it, give it a name. So I'm just going to call this one cylinder and push OK. Over in the browser tree, I now have a new component called cylinder, and it is the active component. We have to draw on the active component. And so how do I know it's the active component? Because this little button on the end is pressed. Now if I go up to the top and press here, this is now the active component, which is the entire project. And I'll talk about this in a second as to why I don't want to draw when this is active. So let's just draw our cylinder and finish it off. Okay, so it's active. I am now drawing on cylinder, and as I draw, I'm going to create a sketch. I'm going to sketch on some surface. So in this case, it's going to be this plane right here. And if I don't want to see this, which was my square, I should turn it off. So I can turn off the sketch or the body and it disappears. So I just switched, made them invisible. And now I'm going to draw the cylinder. Well, a cylinder is simply a circle, boom, like this. And I'll say it's 2 inches, sure. 2 inches, and now I will extrude it. So I'll click on it just like we did the square. And okay, that'll work right there. So I have a cylinder. Now I'm going to draw another component just so I can show you the difference between drawing components. So right click again, new component, and this one's going to be, hexagon, I'll call it. But this time I'm going to show you what happens if I forget to give it a name up here. I'm just going to push OK. And now it's called component 2 by default. It just assigns it a name. But if I slow click twice, normal clicking left button, 1, 2, then it changes the box so that I can edit it. So I'm going to call this one hexagon. Enter. Just to show you a few other things we can draw. Now I'm going to not have cylinder active. If cylinder is active, you'll know it because the radio button here is clicked. It says activate component. And also this is shaded. But as soon as I start drawing hexagon and click this one and make it active, this goes ghosty because I'm not drawing on it. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up to create. I'm going to pick, I'm going to make a sketch as I always have to start. I'm going to sketch again on this plane. And I'm going to create a polygon. And it's going to be this style right here, the first one. And I'm going to click and draw it out. And this is going to be a 1.25, just for no reason really. Push enter. And hold shift, middle mouse button. You can see that I just have a piece of paper I drew a polygon on, but I'm going to now extrude it, pushing E. Now I'm going to draw that one out. Push OK. Okay, so I have two components that I've drawn here. One is a cylinder, one is a polygon. So cylinder, or hexagon. There we go. And notice one is always ghosted because I'm always drawing on one or the other. If I wanted to see them both in their nice shaded form, I'd have to go top level here and click that button. And now I can see them both. But right now, I wouldn't be drawing on either. So I'll show you what happens as I created them. Under cylinder, because I was drawing on cylinder, guess what I got? I got a sketch. Boom. Hang on, there we go, sketch, and a body. The sketch is the circle I drew, the body is the extrusion. And then I'm going to collapse that. Under hexagon, what do you think I got? You're right. Oh, come on, click for me. There we go. I got a body. There it is. And I got a sketch. There it is. So there's my sketch of a hexagon, and then I extruded it into a body. So what happens is, because I'm drawing on the component by picking it, all of the bodies and sketches associated with that component get stored underneath that component. So these sketches and bodies aren't underneath any component. They do belong to this cube. But the problem is they are not, well, as I spin around here, having some problems with my computer, it's not clicking the way I want, boom. They are not associated with anything called a cube. So I lose organization, and I also can't do stuff like this. Say I don't want the cylinder on right now. Boom, I can click it. Off, on. Say I only want to see the hexagon. I've got a ton of different components, but I just want to work on this hexagonal part. Well, what I do is I right-click on it, and I go isolate, and everything else is automatically turned off, and I can just focus on this part. This is super important. When we draw our first robotics robot, it's very complex. It has many, many parts. And I want to just work on one part, and I want everything else to go away. So all I do is find that part, right-click, isolate it. Everything else is gone. I draw on that part, whatever I have to do, and then I go back, I right-click again, and I unisolate it. It's just a toggle. Okay. So it's super important to draw components, decide how many parts you're going to draw, and start naming them basically. You can always go back and rename them. Now, here's a question. Could I create a new component called cube and push OK? I have a new component. There's nothing under it yet because nothing's drawn. Could I drag these sketches for the cube underneath the cube and put them in there? Well, the answer is sometimes. If you catch it early on, it's possible, and drag the bodies. But what happens is, I think, if you get too far down the line, the program isn't quite smart enough to figure out that that's what you want to do. I'm trying right now, as you can see, and it's not successful. So the only thing I can do now to fix this is delete the cube. Right, so I can go back and delete the body, delete. I can delete the sketch, delete. And then I'd just go and make the cube active. I'd make a new sketch. Oh, if this pops up, remember, capture position is always your default. Draw myself a new rectangle, which this is pretty simple on this. And it was 2, tab 2. Enter, extrude that out. And I extruded out too. And now all the bodies and sketches are under cube, and they're all fully controllable individually. So that's components. You have to work with components. You're going to be drawing things with two components, like my lid box or lid bottom of a box thing. That's pretty much all we're going to do for now. But make sure you concentrate on making sure the little radio button is picked when you're trying to draw on either of the components. If you're picked up here, it looks right because everything's on, but your sketches and your bodies won't be going to they won't be associated with the component that they're supposed to be associated with. Hope that makes sense. It's a pretty big topic, pretty strange idea at first, but maybe watch it back again and see if you can get it. Okay, good luck, and now we have what we need to start drawing what we want.